Sarah Thompson had always moved with purpose. Even in her childhood, she was known for running faster, climbing higher, and refusing to give in when things got difficult. Her family often joked that she had been born with fire in her bones, a relentless spark that no challenge could snuff out. That fire had carried her through military school and rigorous training, earning her accolades and respect. But one misstep on the obstacle course during a joint training exercise had changed everything. It was a crisp morning, the kind where the sun peeked over the horizon in golden streaks that promised possibilities, and Sarah felt invincible as she approached the high wall obstacle. The wall had always been her favorite. Her long arms and lithe frame made it seem almost playful. But this day was different. The metal of the bar felt slick from overnight dew. Her grip slipped, and she fell. Not just a stumble or a scrape, but a fall that shattered her tibia and left a tendon torn. The pain was immediate, searing, and relentless. Lying on the mat, Sarah tried to breathe through the agony, but each breath reminded her of how fragile her body was. She wasn't just hurt. She was changed. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. You'll walk again, maybe run, but your recovery will take months. You might never be the same physically. It was a blow not only to her body, but to her identity. For Sarah, strength had always been defined by what she could do with her body. Now, it seemed like that definition was slipping away. Weeks of hospital beds, physical therapy, and crutches followed. The first time she saw her reflection with crutches under her arms, a pang of frustration struck her chest. She wasn't used to needing assistance. She wasn't used to vulnerability. And yet, as she learned to take one step at a time, she realized that the challenge wasn't just in walking, it was in redefining what strength meant to her. Months later, Sarah stood outside the gates of the Navy SEAL training facility. She wasn't there as a trainee, but as an observer, invited to witness part of a high-intensity leadership workshop. The thought of walking through the doors still made her stomach tighten. The crutches clutched in her hands were more than tools. They were symbols of her struggle, proof of both her limitation and her resilience. Every tap of her crutches against the concrete sounded louder than she expected. Every glance from a passing soldier felt like a silent judgment. The training yard was alive with activity. SEALs ran drills, lifted heavy equipment, and demonstrated feats of physical endurance that made her chest tighten with both admiration and longing. She was no stranger to physical rigor, but the speed and precision of these elite warriors was awe-inspiring. And yet, beneath the awe, Sarah felt the familiar sting of self-doubt. Could she belong in this world now? Could she ever command the same respect she once did, even if just as an observer? As she stepped into a room where a group of SEALs were gathered, her crutches clicked against the floor, drawing immediate attention. Some faces softened with polite curiosity, but others twisted into smirks. Whispers rippled through the room, barely audible but sharp enough to pierce her confidence. One of the younger SEALs muttered something under his breath, and a few others chuckled. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. She tried to hold her head high, determined not to let their reactions dictate her emotions. She reminded herself why she was there, to learn, to observe, to continue proving, first to herself, that she was still formidable despite her injury. But the laughter made each step heavier, each movement more calculated. Her crutches weren't just tools for walking. They were a test of her patience, of her composure under judgment. Amid the murmurs, a commanding figure entered the room. The three-star general, known for his stern demeanor and respect among even the toughest SEALs, surveyed the group silently. Sarah noticed the way the room straightened, the whispers fading, as if the presence of authority itself could still command respect where laughter had taken hold. The general's eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned the room before landing on her. For a moment, their gazes locked. She saw no pity, only recognition of something deeper, a spark that refused to be extinguished by circumstance. As the group prepared for the day's activities, Sarah followed along as best as she could, her movements careful, deliberate. The obstacle courses, the weight exercises, the rapid response drills all were reminders of what she had lost physically, but also glimpses of what she could still achieve mentally. She began to strategize, observing how the seals moved, how they adapted to challenges, how they communicated silently in the heat of exertion. Her mind, still sharp, found new ways to measure strength beyond muscle and speed. But the laughter lingered. Every time she shifted her weight, every tap of the crutches, she could feel eyes on her. The seals weren't outright cruel, but the teasing and subtle mockery were enough to make her question herself. Sarah fought the urge to respond defensively, remembering that patience was a form of strength in itself. She reminded herself that true courage was not the absence of fear or humiliation, but the ability to move forward despite it. Later, during a break, she sat on a bench near the perimeter of the training yard, her crutches leaning beside her. Sweat clung to her brow, and her muscles ached in ways that reminded her she was alive, resilient, still capable in her own way. A younger seal approached, not with judgment, but curiosity. He asked her about her injury, her recovery, and her plans. For the first time that morning, Sarah felt a flicker of genuine connection. She realized that not everyone there saw her as a punchline. Some saw her as an example, as someone who refused to be defined by limitations. The day wore on, and Sarah continued to navigate the facility, her crutches a constant reminder of both vulnerability and power. She noticed the general observing quietly, not intervening yet, but always present, always aware. There was a sense of tension in the air, as though everyone, herself included, sensed that this day might be more than just routine training, that the boundaries of expectation, respect, and courage were about to be tested. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink, Sarah felt a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. She had faced mockery, self-doubt, and physical strain, yet she had survived it all. More than survival, she had begun to understand something profound. Strength was not simply what one could do, but how one carried oneself when the world doubted them. She had taken the first steps toward a moment she didn't yet fully understand, but would soon define. As she left the training yard, her crutches tapping rhythmically against the concrete, she carried more than pain or fatigue. She carried a fire, a determination to prove that courage and resilience could not be measured by muscle alone. Somewhere inside, she knew that the real test of her strength was still to come. And when it did, she would be ready. The next morning, the sunlight streamed across the training yard, sharp and uncompromising, illuminating every sweat-streaked face, every powerful movement of the Navy SEALs in their element. Sarah Thompson stepped cautiously onto the concrete, crutches in hand, her heart pounding. The echoes of yesterday's laughter still lingered in her ears. It wasn't just a sound, it was a reminder that the world had already decided what she could or couldn't do. She refused to let them win. From the moment she entered the room, she felt the eyes of the elite soldiers on her. Some were curious, some indifferent, but several held amusement, barely restrained, ready to test her confidence. She tried to steel herself, adjusting her crutches with deliberate precision, each movement an assertion of her presence. She was not invisible. She would not shrink. "Don't hurt yourself," one SEAL muttered under his breath, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. A ripple of quiet laughter spread among a few others. Sarah's jaw tightened. Her cheeks burned, but she forced herself to inhale slowly, grounding her thoughts. This was more than a physical trial. It was a test of patience, focus, and mental resilience. She moved toward the obstacle area, where SEALs demonstrated agility and strength drills. Soldiers vaulted over walls, swung from ropes, and hauled heavy packs across the yard with effortless precision. Sarah's crutches tapped rhythmically against the ground as she navigated her way through the crowd, drawing more curious glances. A group of seals paused mid-lift, their eyes flicking to her before the laughter resumed. The sound was sharper this time, louder, and intentionally cutting. "Bet she can't even get past the first obstacle," one of them joked. Sarah froze for a split second. The words stung, but they also ignited a fire within her. She gritted her teeth and thought of the months spent in rehab, the countless nights spent in pain, learning to walk again, to stand tall despite her limitations. She realized then that she wasn't just here to observe, she was here to redefine their expectations. Moving with careful determination, she approached the first obstacle, a low wall meant to be vaulted or climbed. Many of the seals did it with fluidity and confidence. Sarah's mind raced. Her body was capable, but it wasn't the same as before. She considered a detour, but a small, stubborn voice inside her whispered, "Prove them wrong." She gripped her crutches tightly and began her approach. The first step was shaky. Her injured leg protested, but she pushed forward, relying on her upper body and sheer will. The laughter around her softened, replaced by quiet murmurs of curiosity. Sarah felt a surge of determination each step, each movement a silent declaration that she would not be defined by injury or mockery. Some seals watched with genuine interest now, though a few still whispered, exchanging smirks. Sarah could feel their judgment, but she refused to let it control her. Every muscle in her body burned, but she embraced it. This was her battlefield, not just the physical obstacle in front of her, but the invisible challenge of proving her resilience. A younger seal, perhaps sensing the tension in the room, muttered something encouraging under his breath, and Sarah caught his eye. There was a spark of acknowledgement there, a recognition that she was more than her crutches. It was fleeting, but it strengthened her resolve. The small gestures mattered, and she focused on those as much as on herself. As the day progressed, Sarah attempted more demonstrations alongside the seals, using her crutches creatively to navigate obstacles and maintain balance. She wasn't perfect, but her determination was palpable. Every stumble was met with quick recovery, every hesitant step with ingenuity. The room began to shift, the laughter quieting as awe began to replace mockery in the eyes of some observers. Yet the challenges were not only physical, they were social and psychological. The mocking seals still attempted to undermine her confidence, whispering comments and exchanging glances. Sarah felt the sting but refused to retaliate with anger. She reminded herself that respect could not be demanded, only earned. She would earn it through demonstration of strength, courage, and ingenuity. During a break, she leaned against a wall, taking shallow breaths, reflecting on the day so far. Sweat clung to her brow, and her muscles throbbed with fatigue. Despite it all, she felt a strange exhilaration, the kind that comes from defying expectations, challenging norms, and standing firm when everyone doubts you. Her crutches, once symbols of limitation, now felt like tools of empowerment. The three-star general observed silently from the sidelines. His eyes, sharp and assessing, never left her. Sarah sensed his awareness, the quiet acknowledgement that she was more than a passive observer. She did not yet know how pivotal this day would become, but she could feel the subtle tension in the room, the unspoken question: who among us truly defines strength? The seals began a more advanced drill, lifting heavy packs and running sprints with precision. Sarah watched carefully, analyzing every movement, every method. She realized she didn't have to match them in brute strength. She could match them in strategy, adaptability, and determination. Her mind became as much a weapon as her body, plotting the most efficient path through each challenge. Then came the moment that would define the day. One of the seals, clearly growing impatient, leaned forward and challenged her directly. "Think you can make it through the next obstacle without falling on your face?" His voice was sharp, the tone mocking. The room held its collective breath, waiting for her response. Sarah's chest tightened, but she straightened her shoulders. "I'll try," she said calmly, her voice carrying more confidence than she felt. She stepped forward, crutches ready, and approached the obstacle. Each motion was precise, calculated, yet fluid. She balanced, shifted, and adapted, using every ounce of her body and every fragment of mental focus. The seals watched in silence, some mouths slightly open, as she navigated the obstacle with a combination of resilience, ingenuity, and courage. When she reached the end, she did not stumble. She did not falter. She paused, letting the moment sink in, the room silent except for the distant clatter of other exercises. A few seals exchanged glances, surprise and respect, beginning to replace their earlier amusement. Sarah felt a rush of quiet triumph, not for the validation, but for herself, for proving that strength was far more than physical ability. The general's eyes met hers again. A subtle nod, almost imperceptible, but it carried weight. In that gesture, Sarah understood something profound. Recognition was not about applause or laughter. It was about acknowledgement from those who understood the trials of courage, persistence, and resilience. By the end of the day, Sarah's confidence had grown, but she knew the most critical moments were yet to come. The laughter had not completely vanished, but it had lost its power. A transformation was beginning, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. The battlefield of judgment had been faced head-on, and Sarah had survived it with dignity, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the training yard, Sarah rested against her crutches, exhaustion settling deep into her bones. Her body ached, her muscles screamed, but her spirit was alive, sharper than ever. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and fear, and she had emerged stronger, more focused, more determined. The room was still, but Sarah knew the coming challenges would require even more courage. She was ready, and somewhere in the back of the room, the general smiled faintly, knowing that the moment of reckoning was approaching, a moment that would define not just Sarah Thompson, but every person in that room who would witness her courage. The day had stretched long and merciless, with the sun blazing overhead, each ray illuminating the sweat, effort, and tension that filled the Navy SEAL training facility. Sarah Thompson had navigated obstacle after obstacle, her crutches tapping rhythmically on the concrete, each step a declaration of her resilience. She had faced whispers, stares, and even laughter, yet she remained steadfast. But now, fatigue gnawed at her limbs, her arms quivering, her legs screaming beneath the weight of her crutches. The room was crowded, the air thick with heat, effort, and anticipation, and Sarah could feel herself teetering on the edge. It was one thing to endure physical strain. It was another to withstand the judgment of those who believed she did not belong. Every glance from a smirking SEAL was a reminder that she was different, that her injury made her vulnerable. She could feel it in their eyes, the silent question lingering in the room. How can she belong here? Her chest tightened, a mixture of exhaustion, frustration, and the lingering sting of yesterday's laughter. Sarah gritted her teeth and reminded herself of the countless hours she had spent in rehabilitation, of every painstaking step she had relearned, of the nights she had cried herself to sleep only to rise and try again. She had survived this long because she refused to let her circumstances define her. Yet now, with the laughter echoing faintly in her memory, doubt began to creep in. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she muttered under her breath, almost to herself, as she leaned against a wall for support. The words felt heavy, almost shameful, but they were honest. She was human, and even the strongest sometimes faltered. Her arms shook with exhaustion, her fingers gripping the crutches as if they were lifelines, and she wondered if the SEAL's judgments would ever fade. From across the room, she felt a presence watchful, calculating, and unwavering. The three-star general had been observing silently for hours, his face impassive, his posture rigid. Unlike the seals, he had offered no smirks, no whispered jokes, no glances of doubt. He was assessing, measuring not only her physical ability, but her mental fortitude, the core of her resilience. Sarah felt his gaze, penetrating and discerning, and a strange mixture of fear and hope coursed through her. Her mind flickered back to her childhood, to moments when she had been underestimated, dismissed, or laughed at for being too small, too young, too different. Every memory had left its mark, shaping her into the person who refused to bow to ridicule. And yet, the room was now full of men who had conquered far greater physical challenges, and some still seemed to doubt her worth. The seals, sensing her moment of weakness, began to murmur among themselves. A few exchanged subtle smirks, as if testing her resolve. Sarah felt the familiar pang of humiliation, but clenched her jaw. She would not leave. She would not yield. Not now. Not after everything she had endured. Her resolve hardened like steel, tempered by pain and determination. She knew that the breaking point was not about physical limits. It was about choice. She could either succumb to doubt or rise above it. A commanding voice broke the tension. The general cleared his throat, and the room immediately quieted. Even the seals, seasoned and battle-hardened, straightened at the sound of authority. Strength, he said, his voice deep and steady, is not measured solely by the weight you lift or the obstacles you overcome. True strength is revealed when one faces doubt, fear, and judgment, and still chooses to stand. The words struck Sarah like a hammer against steel. She felt a surge of clarity and purpose. The moment she had been dreading, the scrutiny, the laughter, the challenge, was not a test of her weakness, but a stage for her courage. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself, and straightened her shoulders. Her crutches, once symbols of limitation, now felt like extensions of her determination. The seals watched silently, the energy in the room shifting. Some were intrigued, others skeptical, but all were aware that something significant was about to unfold. Sarah's chest heaved with exhaustion, yet her mind raced with focus. She had survived countless trials, endured pain, and rebuilt herself step by step. Now she would confront not only the physical challenge ahead, but the invisible gauntlet of judgment and expectation. The general's eyes remained locked on her, sharp and unwavering. There was no pity in his gaze, only recognition, a recognition that she carried a fire few possessed, a resilience that could not be measured by conventional standards. Sarah felt a spark of courage ignite within her, a determination so fierce it drowned out the murmurs of doubt and laughter. She moved toward the next obstacle, a complex structure designed to test balance, agility, and upper body strength. Her arms trembled under the strain of her weight, her legs wobbled beneath her, yet every step was deliberate, every motion calculated. She relied not only on her body, but on her mind, observing, adapting, and overcoming. Each movement sent a message to the room. She was here, she belonged, and she would not falter. Some seals leaned forward, their expressions shifting from amusement to awe. A few still whispered, but their voices were tentative now, unsure in the presence of her determination. Sarah felt the tension of the room, the weight of expectation, and the silent challenge embedded in the general's gaze. She was not merely participating. She was redefining what it meant to be strong, to persevere, to command respect despite physical limitation. Halfway through the obstacle, her muscles screamed in protest. Sweat ran down her forehead, stinging her eyes. Her crutches threatened to slip, and for a moment she faltered. Doubt whispered in her mind, urging her to stop, to retreat. But then she remembered the countless hours of therapy, the nights of pain, the sacrifices made, the dreams deferred. She forced herself forward, step by step, never losing focus. When she finally reached the end, she paused, breathing heavily, her body trembling with exertion. The room was silent. Even the mocking seals held their breath, unsure how to respond. Sarah's chest rose and fell rapidly, but her gaze was steady. She had faced judgment, laughter, and her own fear, and she had not only endured, she had conquered. The general stepped forward, breaking the silence. His voice was calm but commanding. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the mastery of it. You have shown that today. He looked directly at Sarah, a faint, approving nod acknowledging the fire within her. The room, previously filled with skepticism and amusement, now vibrated with a new energy, respect, awe, and silent admiration. In that moment, Sarah realized something profound. Her breaking point had not been a point of defeat, but a threshold of transformation. She had faced her deepest fears, the judgment of others, and her own self-doubt. And she had emerged not broken, but stronger, more resolute, and ready for the challenges yet to come. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the training yard, Sarah leaned against her crutches, exhaustion heavy in her limbs, but lightness in her heart. She had faced the laughter and scorn, confronted her limits, and discovered the power of resilience. The general's eyes remained on her, a quiet promise that the pivotal moment, the true test of her courage, was approaching. And somewhere deep within, Sarah knew that the next step she took would define not just her standing in the room, but the measure of her strength in the world beyond it. She was ready to meet whatever came next, with crutches in hand and courage in her heart. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and concrete from the Navy SEAL training facility. Sarah Thompson arrived at the yard with her crutches in hand, her body exhausted from the previous days of rigorous trials, but her mind sharper than ever. She knew the pivotal moment was approaching, the one that would test every ounce of her resilience, courage, and ingenuity. Today, she wasn't just confronting obstacles or skeptical glances. Today, she would face the ultimate challenge. The three-star general stood at the center of the yard, tall, imposing, and commanding every eye in the room. His uniform was immaculate, his demeanor calm yet authoritative, and his gaze swept the SEALs and visitors alike with a precision that demanded attention. When he spoke, the room immediately fell silent. Today, the general began, his voice deep and unwavering. We test more than physical strength. We test determination, adaptability, and courage. Every one of you will demonstrate your ability to overcome obstacles that challenge not just your body, but your mind and spirit. All eyes turned toward Sarah, the subtle murmur of anticipation cutting through the tension. For a moment, doubt flickered. Was the challenge meant to intimidate her, or had the general recognized her potential? She tightened her grip on her crutches, drawing strength from the fire she had carried through injury, pain, and ridicule. This was her moment. The obstacle was unlike any she had faced before. A towering structure of ropes, walls, and uneven platforms awaited, demanding balance, strength, and ingenuity. Many SEALs approached it with confidence, muscles rippling, bodies honed for such trials. Sarah's body ached, her injured leg reminding her of its limitations, yet her determination surged. She was ready to show that true strength extended beyond muscle and endurance. It was defined by courage, creativity, and heart. She took a deep breath, centering herself. Each step onto the platform required precision. She relied on her crutches, not merely as supports, but as tools, extending her reach and stabilizing her movements. The SEALs watched, initially skeptical, as she navigated the first section with careful deliberation, adapting her movements to her unique physicality. A rope swing loomed ahead, a test of upper body strength and balance. Many would have charged forward with reckless confidence. Sarah analyzed, calculated, and approached with measured steps. She used the crutches to anchor herself, finding leverage in unconventional ways, each motion purposeful. The room fell silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of her crutches against the wood. Even the most seasoned seals exchanged glances, some unable to hide the surprise in their eyes. The middle section demanded agility and quick decision-making. Uneven platforms shifted under weight, and a narrow beam stretched across a pool of water below. Sarah hesitated for a fraction of a second, considering her options. Then she remembered the countless nights spent rebuilding her strength, the therapists who had pushed her, the friends who had doubted her, and the inner fire that refused to be extinguished. Step by step, she navigated the precarious beam, crutches balancing her weight, muscles quivering but controlled. Some seals began whispering, astonishment lacing their tones. A few muttered under their breath, "She's managing it?" The laughter that had once filled the room was gone, replaced by tension and a growing sense of awe. Sarah did not allow herself to notice their reactions. Her focus remained solely on the path before her, each movement deliberate, precise, and courageous. The final section was the most formidable. A high wall with a rope dangling over it, demanding both upper body strength and strategic thinking. Most seals approached it with brute force, leaping or swinging with muscular prowess. Sarah assessed her approach, aware that attempting to mimic them would only lead to failure. Instead, she devised a plan, using her crutches to gain leverage and shift her center of gravity. It was a delicate dance of balance, strength, and ingenuity. The general's eyes never left her. For a brief moment, their gazes met, and Sarah felt an unspoken understanding. He recognized her struggle, her determination, and the uniqueness of her method. She wasn't just completing the challenge. She was redefining it, showing that resilience and intelligence could match, and sometimes surpass, raw strength. With a final effort, she hauled herself over the top of the wall, her muscles screaming, sweat dripping into her eyes. The room erupted into a stunned silence, broken only by the sound of her crutches hitting the platform below as she steadied herself. She exhaled, chest heaving, adrenaline surging through every fiber of her being. For a moment, no one moved. The seals who had once whispered and smirked now stared, mouths slightly open, expressions unreadable but undeniably impressed. Sarah's heart pounded, not from exertion alone, but from the realization that she had commanded their attention, their respect, without a single word, simply through action, courage, and perseverance. The general stepped forward, his presence cutting through the silence like a knife. "Strength," he said, his voice carrying across the yard, "is not measured by the ability to follow the expected path, but by the courage to forge your own, even when the world doubts you." He paused, eyes locking with Sarah's. "You have done that today." A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the room. The mocking smirks were gone, replaced by genuine respect. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, triumph, and validation. But more than that, she felt the quiet satisfaction of proving to herself that her body, though altered, did not define the limits of her spirit. Several seals approached, hesitant at first, then with curiosity and respect. "How did you?" One began, but paused, unsure how to articulate the awe she had inspired. Sarah smiled faintly, too exhausted to speak at length, but her presence alone spoke volumes. She had turned ridicule into admiration, doubt into inspiration. As the day wound down, Sarah rested against her crutches, the cool wind carrying the scent of pine and metal, mingling with the faint tang of sweat and effort. She reflected on what had transpired, the laughter, the whispers, the doubts all now replaced with recognition of her courage. The general's nod of approval, subtle but profound, lingered in her mind. She realized that the challenge had been more than physical. It had tested her resolve, her patience, and her ability to remain composed under scrutiny. She had faced judgment, ridicule, and her own fear, and emerged not just intact, but empowered. Her crutches, once symbols of limitation, had become instruments of creativity, adaptability, and triumph. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Sarah knew that today had marked a turning point. The seals who had left, the skepticism that had shadowed her every step, the silent observations of the general all, had converged to create a crucible in which her courage had been forged. And somewhere in the distance, the general's watchful eyes remained on her, a reminder that the room had witnessed not just a demonstration of skill, but a transformation. Sarah Thompson had faced the ultimate challenge, both external and internal, and she had proven, without question, that strength was as much about mind and spirit as it was about muscle and endurance. She allowed herself a rare moment of quiet pride. This was more than triumph over an obstacle. It was triumph over expectation, doubt, and the limitations imposed by both circumstance and judgment. She was ready for whatever came next, knowing that the room, once filled with laughter and doubt, now recognized her courage and resilience. And as she lowered herself to a sitting position, crutches at her side, Sarah Thompson understood something fundamental. The real challenge wasn't just the obstacles before her, but the courage to rise again and again, when the world and sometimes even herself doubted her strength. The room was silent. Not the polite silence of attention, but the thick, charged silence that followed an extraordinary display of courage. Sarah Thompson's body trembled from exertion, sweat running in rivulets down her brow, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. She had faced the challenge, navigated every obstacle with ingenuity, and defied every expectation the Navy SEALs had placed upon her. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, chest rising and falling rapidly, the weight of exhaustion heavy in her limbs, but lightened in her heart. The SEALs who had laughed at her crutches now stood frozen, unsure how to react. Their expressions ranged from stunned disbelief to grudging admiration. No words could adequately capture the surprise and respect that had replaced the previous derision. Sarah could feel their gazes on her. The room's energy shifted. The mockery had evaporated, replaced by awe, though some tried to mask it behind polite nods or cautious glances. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her performance had said everything. But the general, standing tall in his crisp uniform, understood that silence alone would not cement the lesson. His eyes, sharp and discerning, swept across the room, observing the soldiers who had doubted her and noting the subtle shifts in their expressions. Then, with the quiet authority that commanded attention without a single raised voice, he addressed the group. "Strength," he began, his voice calm but resonant, "is not measured solely by what the body can accomplish. Strength is revealed in how one faces adversity, in how one perseveres when the world doubts you. True strength is both physical and moral, and today we have witnessed an extraordinary example." His gaze shifted directly to Sarah. She felt a flutter of nerves, but met his eyes with unwavering resolve. In that moment, she understood that the general's recognition was not mere courtesy. It was acknowledgement of something deeper, something she had fought to preserve: courage in the face of doubt, resilience in the shadow of mockery, and the unyielding determination to rise above expectation. Then came the moment that would etch itself permanently into the memory of every person in the room. The general moved deliberately toward the center, each step echoing with authority. He stopped, then reached down and lifted a pair of crutches that had been positioned against a nearby wall. There was no fanfare, no dramatic speech, only a simple, profound action. The room fell completely silent, the kind of silence that presses down on the chest, heavy with respect and awe. Every SEAL in the room froze. Every whisper ceased. Every skeptical glance vanished. The general hoisted the crutches with ease, demonstrating his own ability to face the limitations and challenges symbolized by the simple tools in his hands. The message was unspoken, yet unmistakable. Courage and strength are not defined by circumstance. They are defined by the will to act, by the refusal to yield to doubt or ridicule. Sarah felt a shiver run through her body. The general's act was more than symbolic. It was a validation, a silent endorsement of her resilience. The room, once filled with laughter and judgment, had shifted. The hierarchy of skepticism had been dismantled, replaced with an awareness that true strength is measured not by the easy triumphs, but by the ability to endure, adapt, and overcome. The seals, initially frozen in disbelief, began to murmur softly among themselves. Some nodded, some looked down, reflecting on their own behavior. The laughter that had greeted Sarah upon her arrival was now a distant memory, replaced by admiration, and in some cases, humility. They had been witnesses to something extraordinary, a demonstration that courage could not be quantified, that determination could not be dismissed, and that resilience could inspire even the toughest soldiers to rethink their assumptions. Sarah's own chest rose and fell with rapid, heavy breaths, but her mind was clear, her spirit lifted. She realized that the moment was bigger than her own achievement. It was about changing the room, shifting perspectives, and challenging the deeply ingrained notions of strength and worth. For the first time, she felt that her presence, her determination, and her courage had truly made an impact. The general stepped closer to her, lowering the crutches with deliberate care. His gaze softened slightly, a rare acknowledgement of the personal struggle she had endured to arrive at this moment. "You have shown what many take a lifetime to learn," he said quietly, yet with authority that carried across the room. "Courage is not absence of fear, nor strength absence of limitation. Today, you have taught a lesson in both." A ripple of quiet acknowledgement spread through the seals. Some approached Sarah cautiously, extending hands and nods, others lingering in the background, absorbing the gravity of what had transpired. The dynamic of the room had shifted entirely. Sarah, once subject to derision, was now at the center of respect and admiration. Her crutches, tools of her struggle, had become symbols of triumph and ingenuity. One of the younger seals, the same who had whispered encouragement days before, stepped forward. His voice was unsteady, tinged with awe. I didn't think," he began, then paused, struggling to find words adequate to express what he had witnessed. Sarah smiled faintly, understanding that words were unnecessary. The demonstration, the challenge, and the general's symbolic gesture had spoken louder than any speech could. Sarah felt a surge of pride, but it was tempered with humility. She knew that this was not just about her victory over the obstacle course or the ridicule. It was about the acknowledgement of her journey. The months of rehabilitation, the moments of pain and doubt, and the relentless persistence that had brought her here. She understood that true strength was not about impressing others, but about proving to oneself that adversity could be faced and overcome with dignity and courage. The general raised his voice once more, addressing the room as a whole. "Let this be remembered," he said, "that courage manifests in unexpected places, that resilience is often invisible until tested, and that respect is earned through integrity, determination, and the willingness to rise when the world expects you to fall." His gaze swept across the assembled seals, locking eyes with each of them, conveying the gravity of his words. The room, heavy with reflection and newfound awareness, remained silent for a moment longer. Then, one by one, the seals began to acknowledge Sarah's achievement. Nods, quiet murmurs of respect, and subtle gestures replaced the previous mocking laughter. It was a transformation, not just in the perception of Sarah's abilities, but in the very culture of the room, a reminder that courage and strength were multidimensional, not limited to physical prowess alone. Sarah exhaled deeply, the tension finally easing from her shoulders. The physical strain of the challenge remained, but it was overshadowed by the emotional and psychological victory she had earned. She had faced doubt, judgment, and ridicule, and emerged not only intact but triumphant. The lesson was clear, not just to the seals, but to herself. The true measure of strength lies in resilience, courage, and the refusal to yield to expectation or fear. The general stepped back, his presence still commanding, yet now infused with quiet approval. He glanced at Sarah once more, nodding subtly, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. The room, transformed by what had occurred, seemed to hold its collective breath, understanding that they had witnessed more than a simple demonstration. They had witnessed the triumph of spirit, the embodiment of perseverance, and the redefinition of what it meant to be strong. As Sarah lowered herself to a bench, Crutches at her side, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The journey had been arduous, marked by physical pain, ridicule, and self-doubt, yet it had led to this turning point, a moment when the world had recognized the depth of her courage. She realized that her strength was no longer solely her own. It had become a lesson, a symbol, a catalyst for change in those who had once doubted her. And as the sun cast long shadows across the training yard, illuminating the sweat, determination, and respect in the room, Sarah Thompson understood something profound. The true turning point was not the obstacles she had overcome, nor the laughter she had silenced, but the recognition that courage, resilience, and integrity could command respect where physical strength alone could not. She had faced the ultimate challenge, the judgment of others and the limitations imposed by circumstance, and had emerged victorious, not through brute force, but through determination, ingenuity, and unwavering courage. And in that victory, she found not only respect from those around her, but a deeper understanding of herself and the limitless potential of the human spirit. The atmosphere in the training yard had changed completely. Where moments ago there had been whispers, laughter, and judgment, now there was a reverent stillness. Sarah Thompson, exhausted but resolute, stood at the center of the room, Crutches at her side, her posture upright and proud. The Navy SEALs who had mocked her now approached cautiously, their expressions a mixture of awe, humility, and admiration. The shift was tangible, almost electric. The room itself seemed to recognize that respect had been earned. One of the younger SEALs, the same who had been quietly curious from the beginning, stepped forward first. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady but filled with unspoken wonder, I didn't realize." He paused, searching for the right words, struggling to articulate the respect that had replaced the doubt. Sarah smiled faintly, a small nod acknowledging his courage in speaking. Words were secondary here. The acknowledgement in their eyes said more than any sentence could. Another SEAL approached, this one taller, more imposing, his arms still defined from the rigorous exercises they had performed. "I misjudged you," he admitted quietly, a hint of shame in his tone. I thought you wouldn't even make it through the course." He nodded toward the obstacle she had completed with ingenuity and determination. "But you did. You showed us something none of us expected." Sarah felt warmth in her chest, a mixture of relief and quiet pride. She had not sought approval from these elite soldiers, but the recognition was meaningful nonetheless. Every whispered doubt, every smirk, every subtle judgment had been replaced with understanding. Respect was not demanded. It was earned through resilience, courage, and the willingness to rise when expectation said otherwise. The general, observing quietly from the center of the yard, allowed the room to adjust. His presence alone commanded attention, but now it carried a different weight. He had seen Sarah not only confront the physical challenges, but also navigate the psychological battlefield of doubt and mockery. His eyes softened slightly, revealing a rare acknowledgement of admiration for the young woman who had proven herself in a way that words alone could not convey. Sarah realized that the respect she had earned extended beyond herself. It had begun to ripple through the entire group. The culture of the room, once rigid and unyielding, was subtly shifting. Laughter was replaced by conversation. Judgment replaced by inquiry. Mockery replaced by admiration. She had become a symbol, not just of perseverance, but of possibility. A few seals lingered in silence, still processing what had transpired. They had witnessed someone face a challenge, not only with skill, but with grace under pressure. Sarah's victory was not merely physical. It was an exhibition of character. The young soldiers began to approach her with questions, asking for advice on strategy, technique, and even mental focus. Sarah answered patiently, demonstrating not just knowledge, but leadership and humility. Balance, she explained quietly to one seal, isn't just about your feet or hands. It's about your mind. You anticipate, you adjust, you control what you can. The rest? You endure it and keep going. Her voice was calm, steady, imbued with authority, earned through experience. She had turned a moment of ridicule into a teaching moment, transforming judgment into mentorship. The general stepped closer, nodding toward her as she guided the seals. "Notice how she leads," he said quietly to a nearby officer. "Not through intimidation, but through demonstration. She earns respect by example, not by words. That is the mark of a true leader." His acknowledgement was subtle yet profound, reinforcing the lessons Sarah had embodied for everyone in the room. Over the next hour, Sarah continued to work with the SEALs, sharing her insights, demonstrating strategies, and offering encouragement. Her crutches, once symbols of limitation, were now tools of teaching, helping her show alternative methods and approaches. Even the most skeptical soldiers began to adapt her techniques, realizing that ingenuity and determination could complement raw strength in ways they had never considered. By mid-afternoon, the atmosphere had completely transformed. Where ridicule and doubt had once dominated, there was now dialogue, curiosity, and collaboration. Sarah had not only proven her own abilities, but had reshaped the perception of what was possible within the group. Respect had been earned, not through force or assertion, but through action, courage, and integrity. The general called the group together for a debrief, his presence commanding silence. "Today," he began, "we have witnessed not just physical prowess, but the embodiment of resilience and ingenuity. This is a lesson you should carry beyond these walls. Strength is not measured solely by the ability to lift weight, run distances, or complete obstacles. It is measured by the courage to persist, the ability to adapt, and the willingness to face judgment with integrity." He looked directly at Sarah, and she felt the weight of his gaze, not in intimidation, but in recognition. "You have earned respect, not just through achievement, but through character. Remember this lesson, and remember her example." The room, previously tense and uncertain, now resonated with collective understanding. As the soldiers dispersed, a few lingered, continuing to ask questions, seeking guidance, and sharing insights. Sarah engaged with them patiently, realizing that her role had expanded beyond proving herself. It was now about mentorship, inspiration, and leadership. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, understanding that the respect she had earned was more than recognition. It was an opportunity to influence and guide those around her. The day drew to a close, and the sun cast long shadows across the training yard. Sarah rested against a wall, crutches at her side, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. The laughter, whispers, and doubt had been transformed into respect, dialogue, and admiration. She had turned adversity into opportunity, ridicule into inspiration, and limitation into triumph. The general approached her once more, nodding subtly. "Well done," he said simply. No grand gestures, no speeches, just acknowledgement of the extraordinary courage she had displayed. It was enough. The room had witnessed a transformation, and Sarah had not only proven her strength, but had become a beacon of possibility for others. In that moment, Sarah understood the true nature of respect. It was not given lightly, nor could it be demanded. It was earned through action, perseverance, and the courage to confront challenges head-on, even in the face of doubt, mockery, or limitation. And having earned it, she felt a quiet but profound sense of accomplishment. As the seals filed out of the yard, many nodded in acknowledgement. Others offered smiles or brief words of admiration, and a few lingered, unsure how to express the respect they now felt. Sarah watched them go, Crutches at her side, chest swelling with pride and humility. The journey was far from over, but the hardest and most crucial barrier had been overcome. She had earned the respect of those who had once doubted her, including the general who had silently observed from the beginning. For Sarah Thompson, the day had been more than a test of physical skill. It had been a test of character, courage, and perseverance. She had faced judgment, adversity, and skepticism, and had emerged not only victorious, but as a leader, an inspiration, and a living testament to the power of resilience. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows and bathing the training yard in gold, Sarah knew that she had taken her place not just among the seals, but in the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed her triumph. Respect had been earned, and with it came the responsibility, the opportunity, and the recognition of the strength that lies within courage, determination, and integrity. The sun had begun its descent, casting a golden glow over the Navy SEAL training yard. Sarah Thompson leaned against a wall, Crutches at her side, muscles aching, but her spirits soaring. Today had been transformative, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed her courage. She had faced ridicule, overcome doubt, and completed the obstacles in a way that none of the SEALs expected. But the story was far from over. The true power of her journey was beginning to ripple outward, touching those around her in subtle but profound ways. A group of younger SEALs lingered nearby, hesitant at first, then gradually gathering the courage to ask questions. They wanted to understand not just how she had navigated the obstacles, but how she had maintained composure under judgment, how she had turned mockery into motivation. Sarah, though exhausted, engaged with them patiently, explaining her strategies, her mindset, and the way she approached every challenge with focus and resilience. "Balance isn't just about the body," she told one attentive young soldier, demonstrating on a small beam. "It's about your mind. Anticipate, adjust, and keep moving forward. Obstacles aren't always physical. They can be doubts, expectations, or fears. You learn to navigate those the same way you navigate a rope or a wall." Her words resonated deeply. Several of the soldiers nodded, taking mental notes not only of the technique, but of the mindset behind it. They had seen someone face what they believed was impossible and do it with grace and determination. That example lingered in the room, more powerful than any lecture or drill they had ever experienced. Even seasoned SEALs approached her, offering quiet acknowledgement, some with small smiles, others with tentative words of respect. Sarah realized that her journey was no longer solely about proving herself. It had become a teaching moment, a chance to inspire others to push past self-imposed and external limitations. Each interaction reinforced the idea that courage, perseverance, and ingenuity were as vital as brute strength. The general observed from a distance, his eyes following her interactions. He had witnessed her journey from skepticism to triumph, and now he watched her inspire others with the same patience and composure she had displayed during the challenge. There was a quiet satisfaction in his gaze, a recognition that she had not only proven herself, but had also become a catalyst for growth and awareness among the SEALs. Word of her accomplishment began to spread quietly through the ranks. Soldiers who had not been present earlier heard whispers about the woman who had faced ridicule, navigated obstacles with ingenuity, and earned the respect of a 3-star general. Some were skeptical until they witnessed her themselves. Others were inspired immediately. Sarah became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that strength was multifaceted and that courage often manifests in unexpected ways. By mid-afternoon, Sarah had become the center of informal training sessions. SEALs gathered around to watch her demonstrate techniques, to understand her approach to balance, problem-solving, and adaptability. Her crutches, once objects of mockery, were now teaching tools, illustrating that tools and strategies can be adapted to meet unique challenges. She showed how to leverage them for stability, efficiency, and ingenuity, transforming what many considered a limitation into an advantage. One senior SEAL approached cautiously, a mix of curiosity and respect in his eyes. "You've changed the way I think about adaptability," he admitted. "I always relied on brute force, assuming there was only one right way to overcome obstacles. But your approach shows that strategy and creativity can be just as effective, even more so in some cases." Sarah nodded, appreciating the recognition. "It's not about doing it the same way everyone else does," she explained. "It's about understanding your own strengths and limitations and using them to your advantage. Obstacles are never one size fits all. The moment you try to fit yourself into someone else's mold, you limit what you can achieve." As the day wore on, Sarah's influence extended beyond training. Conversations shifted, attitudes softened, and a culture of curiosity and respect began to take root. The room, once dominated by judgment and ridicule, had transformed into a space of learning and collaboration. Soldiers began to question their assumptions, to reconsider what strength truly meant, and to embrace the idea that courage often comes in forms that defy expectation. Even those who had initially doubted her approached with humility. They asked questions, sought guidance, and listened to her insights. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. A once rigid hierarchy of judgment was giving way to a dynamic of respect and learning. Sarah had become a living example of resilience, her actions teaching lessons far beyond the obstacle course. As evening approached, the general called the group together once more. His voice, steady and commanding, carried across the yard. "Today," he began, "we have witnessed not just physical capability, but the power of determination, ingenuity, and resilience. Let this be a lesson for all of you. Respect is earned through courage and integrity, not assumed by rank or tradition. And leadership is demonstrated through example, not authority alone." He looked directly at Sarah, his gaze conveying approval and acknowledgement. "You have not only proven yourself, but you have inspired those around you. Your actions will have a lasting impact on everyone in this room, and your example will resonate long after today." Sarah felt a quiet pride. The journey had been grueling, marked by doubt, ridicule, and physical strain. Yet it had culminated in a moment of profound influence. She had not only faced the challenge herself, but had become a beacon for others, illustrating that strength, courage, and determination are not confined to traditional measures or expectations. As the SEALs dispersed for the evening, many lingered to speak with her, to ask questions, or to simply acknowledge her courage. She responded patiently, offering insights and encouragement, understanding that her role had evolved from participant to mentor, from underdog to exemplar. Each interaction reinforced the idea that true strength is multifaceted, encompassing not only physical ability, but mental fortitude, adaptability, and leadership. Sarah's mind reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the initial skepticism, the laughter, and the ridicule, she had moved through determination, ingenuity, and courage to a position of respect and influence. The transformation was not merely personal. It was communal, reshaping the perceptions and attitudes of those around her. She had turned adversity into inspiration, proving that obstacles, whether physical, mental, or societal, can be overcome with resilience and heart. The training yard was quiet now, bathed in the golden glow of sunset. Sarah sat against a wall, crutches resting nearby, muscles aching but her spirit soaring. She understood that her journey was far from over. There would be future challenges, both physical and emotional. Yet she had gained more than skills or respect. She had gained the understanding that true strength is measured not by the ease of victory, but by the courage to face doubt, fear, and limitation with unwavering resolve. And as the shadows lengthened across the yard, Sarah Thompson realized something profound. She had become more than a symbol of resilience. She had become a source of inspiration, a testament to the transformative power of courage, determination, and integrity. The room that had once been filled with laughter and skepticism was now alive with possibility, curiosity, and admiration. And she had done it not through words alone, but through action, example, and the unyielding belief that limitations, whether imposed by circumstance or perception, could be overcome. Sarah leaned back, crutches at her side, and allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The journey had been long and arduous, marked by doubt, pain, and challenge. Yet it had led to this profound moment of influence and inspiration. She had faced adversity, earned respect, and ignited curiosity and courage in those around her. She had become a living proof that resilience and determination could not only overcome obstacles, but could reshape the world for those who witness it. And as the sun finally disappeared below the horizon, Sarah Thompson sat quietly, her heart full, knowing that her story, the laughter, the challenge, the triumph had begun to inspire change far beyond the training yard. She had faced doubt, defied expectation, and emerged not only victorious, but as a guiding light for those who would follow. The following morning, the Navy SEAL training yard was quieter than usual, a calm settling over the space after the previous day's intensity. Sarah Thompson arrived early, crutches in hand, muscles sore but her spirit resolute. Though exhausted, she was eager to continue demonstrating that courage and determination could outshine expectation and doubt. Yet she knew that the most significant impact she could make wasn't about completing another obstacle course. It was about leaving a lasting impression, inspiring others, and redefining what strength truly meant. Word of her accomplishments had spread beyond the initial group of SEALs who witnessed her triumph. Commanding officers, instructors, and even senior officers from other divisions had heard whispers of the woman who had faced ridicule, overcome immense obstacles, and earned the respect of both peers and the three-star general. Her story had begun to resonate across ranks, inspiring curiosity, reflection, and in some cases, profound admiration. Today, Sarah's purpose went beyond training. She had been invited to speak with a new cohort of recruits, many of whom were facing the same physical and mental challenges that she had once confronted. The young soldiers looked at her with a mix of respect, awe, and tentative curiosity. Some had heard the stories of her accomplishments. Others had only seen the results firsthand. But all sensed that they were in the presence of someone extraordinary, someone whose courage could redefine their own understanding of possibility. "Good morning," Sarah began, her voice steady, carrying easily across the training room. "I know some of you have doubts about yourselves, about what you can achieve, and maybe even about what people expect from you. I've been there. I've faced judgment, doubt, and ridicule. And I've learned something important. Strength isn't just about muscle. It's about courage, determination, and refusing to give up when the world expects you to fail." Her words resonated deeply. The recruits leaned forward, some nodding, some listening intently, others silently reflecting on their own challenges. Sarah continued, recounting her journey not as a boast, but as a lesson. She spoke of the laughter, the skepticism, the obstacles, and the moments of doubt that had almost broken her. She spoke of persistence, strategy, and the importance of focusing on what she could control rather than what others thought of her. And sometimes, she said, lifting her crutches slightly for emphasis, the tools you think limit, you can actually become your greatest advantage. You learn to adapt, to innovate, and to use every resource at your disposal. That's how you transform doubt into opportunity and weakness into strength. The recruits listened, rapt. Even the instructors, many of whom had seen countless trainees, paused to take in the depth of her insight. Sarah's story was more than an account of physical resilience. It was a demonstration of the power of mindset, courage, and determination. Her presence, her words, and her actions had created a ripple effect, reshaping the way those around her perceived challenge, limitation, and potential. After her speech, Sarah moved to the obstacle course, where several recruits had been struggling. She demonstrated techniques, offered advice, and encouraged them to think creatively. Her crutches, once symbols of limitation, became tools of guidance, helping her show alternative strategies and solutions. She taught not just the mechanics of movement, but the mindset behind it: focus, adaptability, and the courage to persist despite fear or doubt. The recruits began to mirror her approach, experimenting with new methods, learning to adjust to obstacles in ways they had never considered. Laughter returned to the training yard, but it was now of a different kind: light, collaborative, and infused with a sense of possibility rather than ridicule. The atmosphere was transformed, not by authority alone, but by example. Sarah's courage had created a culture shift, one that emphasized ingenuity, resilience, and respect. Later, the general returned to observe the morning session. He watched silently as Sarah guided recruits, her patience, clarity, and leadership evident in every gesture and instruction. He recognized that she had evolved from a participant, proving herself into a leader shaping the next generation. His subtle nod of approval carried weight, not only validating her past achievements, but acknowledging the impact she was now having on others. After the session, the general approached Sarah. "You've done more than prove your own strength," he said quietly, a rare smile touching his lips. "You've inspired others to see their own potential, and that is the mark of true leadership. Today, you leave a legacy, one that will endure far beyond these walls." Sarah felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She realized that her journey was no longer solely about personal triumph. It was about influence, mentorship, and inspiring others to confront their own fears, doubts, and limitations. She understood that courage could be contagious, that resilience could ripple outward, and that one act of determination could ignite transformation in those around her. As the day drew to a close, Sarah reflected on how far she had come. From the early moments of ridicule to the intense challenges of the obstacle course, from the skepticism of her peers to the profound acknowledgement of the general, she had transformed adversity into opportunity. She had turned judgment into respect, doubt into inspiration, and limitation into innovation. Her story had become more than personal. It had become a lesson for all who witnessed it. The recruits gathered one final time, expressing gratitude, curiosity, and admiration. Some approached Sarah with questions about technique, others about mindset, and a few simply to acknowledge the courage she had demonstrated. Each interaction reinforced the realization that her impact extended far beyond physical challenges. She was shaping attitudes, teaching resilience, and inspiring future leaders. Even among the seasoned SEALs, a subtle but noticeable shift had occurred. Their initial assumptions had been dismantled, replaced with an understanding that strength is not solely measured by physical prowess, but by determination, ingenuity, and courage under pressure. Sarah had taught them a lesson they would not soon forget, that respect is earned through action, integrity, and perseverance, and that true leadership arises from example rather than authority alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, Sarah sat quietly, Crutches at her side, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and physical limitations, yet she had emerged victorious, respected, and influential. Her courage had become a symbol, her resilience a lesson, and her determination a source of inspiration. She understood that her story was far from over. Challenges would continue, obstacles would arise, and doubt would persist, but she had discovered something profound. The strength to face adversity lay not only in physical capability, but in courage, adaptability, and integrity. And with that understanding, she knew she could continue to inspire, mentor, and lead others in ways that would leave a lasting impact. In the quiet of the training yard, Sarah Thompson realized that her journey had come full circle. What began as a test of her own ability had evolved into a lesson for countless others. The laughter that had once echoed in the room had been replaced by admiration, curiosity, and respect. The obstacle course, once a symbol of limitation, had become a classroom for courage, ingenuity, and leadership. And as the stars began to emerge in the evening sky, Sarah understood that her legacy was not just in the obstacles she had overcome, but in the inspiration she had sparked, the respect she had earned, and the lives she had touched. She had turned doubt into triumph, weakness into innovation, and adversity into opportunity. Her journey was a testament to the power of courage, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring impact of one individual's determination to rise above expectation. Sarah Thompson, once underestimated and mocked, had become a symbol of strength, courage, and inspiration. She had faced the impossible, earned respect, and ignited transformation in others. And in doing so, she had shown the world that true strength is measured not by what one can lift, but by what one can inspire. Her story would live on, not just in the memories of those who witnessed her courage, but in the actions, attitudes, and achievements of those who had been inspired to believe in their own potential. In every step, every decision, and every challenge faced by those who followed, the legacy of Sarah Thompson's courage would endure. A reminder that determination, ingenuity, and unwavering resolve can overcome even the harshest obstacles and leave a lasting mark on the world.